March 23, 1945, 11:47 p.m. Beneath the streets of London, the air in the cabinet war rooms tastes of stale cigarette smoke and anxious waiting. Winston Churchill stands motionless before the map table, his famous cigar burning forgotten between his thick fingers, ash collecting in a precarious cylinder that threatens to fall with his next breath. The overhead lights cast harsh shadows across the territorial markings of Western Europe, but his eyes, those penetrating bulldog eyes, remain fixed on one location, the Rhine River. Around him, staff officers move with practiced quietness, updating positions with colored pins, whispering updates that barely register in the Prime Minister's consciousness. He's been here for hours, watching, waiting, willing the telephone to ring with news from Field Marshal Montgomery. Operation Plunder should have begun by now. Should be underway. Should be making history. 1 million men stand ready along the western bank of the Rhine. 4,000 artillery pieces, meticulously positioned over weeks of preparation. Montgomery has spent months planning this crossing, planning it with such exhaustive detail that the briefing documents alone could fill a library shelf. Every possible contingency accounted for, every risk calculated, every movement choreographed like a deadly ballet. And yet, nothing has happened. Churchill's jaw tightens. His fingers drum against the wooden edge of the map table, the sound echoing in the underground chamber like distant artillery. He knows Montgomery's reputation for caution, for methodical preparation, for refusing to move until every piece is perfectly aligned. It's what makes the man brilliant. It's also what makes him maddeningly slow. The Rhine isn't just another river. It's the final natural barrier protecting Germany's industrial heartland, the factories and foundries that feed the dying Nazi war machine. Cross it, and the road to Berlin opens wide. Cross it successfully, and the war in Europe moves. One massive step closer to its inevitable conclusion. But you have to cross it first. Churchill exhales a long stream of cigar smoke, watching it curl and dissipate in the artificial light. He thinks of the American generals to the south, Bradley, Hodges, and especially that temperamental, brilliant cavalry officer George Patton. They're all positioning their forces along different stretches of the Rhine, each preparing their own crossings, each moving at their own pace. Montgomery's crossing will be the largest, the most significant, the one that history will remember, if it ever actually happens. A junior officer approaches, telegram in hand, movements hesitant. Churchill doesn't turn, doesn't acknowledge him yet. His mind is calculating distances, timelines, political ramifications. Stalin's forces are already deep into Germany from the east, racing toward Berlin with brutal efficiency. Every day Montgomery delays is another day the Soviets claim more territory, more influence, more of post-war Europe. Sir, the officer finally ventures, voice carefully neutral. Churchill turns slowly, the movement deliberate, theatrical even in this private moment. He's been performing the role of Britain's indomitable leader for so long that the performance has become inseparable from the man. His eyebrows raise in silent question. Signal from General Bradley's headquarters, sir, relayed through SHAEF. Churchill's hand extends for the telegram. His eyes scan the text once, then again more slowly. His expression doesn't change. He's too practiced at hiding reaction. But something shifts in his posture. A slight stiffening, a barely perceptible intake of breath. The message is brief, almost casual in its world-shaking significance. Patton has crossed the Rhine. Oppenheim, March 22nd. No preliminary bombardment. Minimal casualties. Bridgehead secured. The date catches him first. March 22nd. That was yesterday, nearly 24 hours ago. While Churchill stood in this underground room waiting for Montgomery to launch his meticulously planned offensive, George Patton, impulsive, aggressive, supposedly undisciplined George Patton, had already crossed the most significant river in Western Europe. And he'd done it quietly. No massive artillery preparation. No weeks of visible buildup. No elaborate coordination with air forces and naval support. Just crossed. Churchill reads the telegram a third time, as if the words might rearrange themselves into something less extraordinary. They don't. March 22nd, 1945, 28 hours earlier. Oppenheim, Germany. George Patton stands on the western bank of the Rhine, watching his assault boats slip into the dark water with barely a whisper. The night is cold enough to see breath, quiet enough to hear the gentle lap of current against wooden hulls. No searchlights sweep the eastern shore. No artillery thunders from behind American lines. The only sound is the rhythmic dip of paddles and the occasional muffled curse from a nervous infantryman. This is not how river crossings are supposed to happen. Military doctrine, written by men who've never met George Patton, dictates that crossing a defended river requires massive preparation. Weeks of reconnaissance, days of artillery bombardment to soften enemy positions, aerial supremacy, engineering battalions prepositioning equipment, diversionary attacks to confuse the enemy about your true intentions. Patton has ignored nearly all of it. His 5th Infantry Division glides across the Rhine like ghosts, their boats painted dark to blend with the water, their movements practiced but unhurried. On the eastern bank, German defenders sit in their positions, unaware that American soldiers are already among them. Some are sleeping. Others are watching the northern stretches of the Rhine, where they expect the real crossing to come, where Montgomery's million-man army waits with its 4,000 guns. Nobody expects the Americans here. Not at Oppenheim. Not tonight. Not like this. The first assault wave touches the eastern shore at 10:30 p.m. Boots hit German soil without a shot fired. Infantry scatter into the darkness, moving with the practiced efficiency of soldiers who've been fighting their way across Europe for months. They know their business. More importantly, they know their commander won't tolerate hesitation. By midnight, 300 Americans hold the eastern bank. By 2 a.m., 600. The German response, when it finally comes, is confused and fragmented. Scattered resistance from defenders who can't believe what's happening, who keep waiting for the artillery bombardment that never arrives, the massive assault that seems impossible given the silence. Patton watches from the western side, his famous ivory-handled revolvers gleaming in the moonlight, his jaw set in that characteristic expression of contained aggression. His staff officers hover nearby, simultaneously awed and terrified by what their commander is attempting. They've seen him pull off impossible feats before, the race across France, the relief of Bastogne in the Battle of the Bulge. But this feels different. The Rhine isn't just strategically significant. It's psychologically monumental. Hitler himself has declared it the final defensive line, the wall that will stop the Allied advance. German propaganda has spent months assuring the people that the Rhine cannot be crossed, that the fatherland remains protected behind this ancient barrier. And Patton is walking across it like it's a creek back in Texas. Sir, his chief engineer ventures carefully, Montgomery's crossing is scheduled to begin in less than 24 hours. With full air support, naval bombardment, paratrooper drops. I know what Montgomery's got. Patton interrupts, not taking his eyes off the eastern shore. He's got everything except what matters. He's got yesterday's plan for tomorrow's war. The engineer falls silent. You don't argue with Patton when he's proven. Right, and the bridgehead expanding across the river is proving him very, very right. By dawn on March 23rd, American engineers are already constructing pontoon bridges. By mid-morning, tanks are rolling across. By afternoon, the bridgehead extends 2 miles deep into German territory. Total American casualties for the initial crossing, 8 men wounded. None killed. Compare that to what military planners expected. Thousands of casualties. Days of fighting. Massive resource expenditure. Patton has achieved it with stealth, speed, and the simple audacity of refusing to believe something is impossible just because everyone says it is. He doesn't immediately announce the success. Not publicly. First, he wants his bridgehead secured, his forces consolidated, his position unassailable. But he does make one phone call to General Bradley, his immediate superior. The conversation is brief. Classic Patton. Brad, I got a surprise for you. We're across. Across what? The Rhine. Crossed last night. Don't tell anyone yet. I want to piss in it first. It's not a joke. Hours later, Patton will walk to the middle of his pontoon bridge, unzip his fly, and urinate into the Rhine River while photographers capture the moment. Some will call it crude, undignified. Patton will call it marking his territory in a way the Romans would understand. But first, the news has to travel up the chain of command. From Bradley to Eisenhower. From Eisenhower's supreme headquarters to the combined chiefs of staff. From military channels to political leadership. To a war room beneath London, where Winston Churchill still waits for Montgomery's offensive to begin. March 24th, 1945. 2:17 a.m. The Cabinet War Rooms, London. Churchill hasn't moved from the map table. The telegram about Patton's crossing sits beside his now-cold cup of tea. Read and reread, so many times the paper has gone soft at the creases. Around him, the war room has taken on the peculiar energy that comes with unexpected victory, staff officers moving with renewed purpose. Conversations slightly louder, the oppressive weight of waiting replaced by the electric buzz of events in motion. But Churchill's face remains unreadable. Finally, at 6:42 a.m., the phone rings with news of Montgomery's crossing. Operation Plunder has begun. The million-man army is moving. 4,000 guns are firing. Paratroopers are dropping behind enemy lines. It is, by any objective measure, a masterpiece of military coordination, exactly the kind of overwhelming force that Montgomery's methodical genius excels at deploying. It is also 24 hours too late to be first. Churchill takes the call himself, listening to the confident reports of initial success, the textbook execution of a textbook operation. He offers congratulations. He says all the right things. But when he hangs up the phone, he stands there for a long moment, one hand still resting on the receiver. "Give me a car," he says quietly. "I'm going to the Rhine." The staff exchanges glances. The Prime Minister doesn't make impulsive trips to active war zones. But nobody argues. March 25th, 1945. Oppenheim, Germany. The pontoon bridge sways slightly under Churchill's feet as he walks across the Rhine, flanked by nervous security officers and one very pleased George Patton. The American general has orchestrated this moment with the same tactical precision he applied to the crossing itself, ensuring photographers are positioned perfectly, ensuring the bridge is secure enough for the British Prime Minister, but still makeshift enough to appear daring. Churchill stops halfway across. Below, the Rhine flows dark and swift, carrying with it centuries of European history. Charlemagne crossed these waters. Caesar's legions forded them. Napoleon's armies tried and failed to hold them. And now, in the spring of 1945, they represent the final barrier between the Allies and the heart of Nazi Germany. A barrier that no longer exists. "You've done well, General," Churchill says, his voice carrying that characteristic rumble that has steadied Britain through its darkest hours. "Remarkably well." Patton grins, that fierce, almost predatory expression that makes him simultaneously loved and feared by his men. "Mr. Prime Minister, I pissed in the Rhine yesterday. Today I wanted you to see what all that planning and preparation was really worth." It's a barb aimed at Montgomery, thinly veiled. Churchill knows it. Patton knows he knows it. The unspoken rivalry between the meticulous British Field Marshal and the aggressive American cavalry officer has been one of the war's persistent subplots. Two brilliant commanders with radically different philosophies, both convinced their way is superior. Field Marshal Montgomery's operation is proceeding successfully. Churchill replies diplomatically. The coordination of forces, the minimization of casualties, it's quite impressive. Sure, Patton agrees, too easily. But I got here first, with a division instead of an army, in the dark instead of at dawn, and the Germans never saw it coming. Churchill turns to look at the eastern shore, where American soldiers are digging in, consolidating positions, preparing for the inevitable German counterattack. They move with the confidence of men who've already achieved the impossible and are ready to do it again if necessary. "Tell me, General," Churchill says thoughtfully, "what do you think Montgomery was waiting for?" Patton considers the question. For once, his answer comes without bravado. Certainty. He was waiting for certainty. Waiting until everything was perfect, every variable controlled, every risk eliminated. And you? I don't wait for certainty, sir. I create it. Speed, aggression, surprise. That's how you make the enemy uncertain while you stay in control. Churchill nods slowly, processing this. He thinks about the years of this war, about the agonizing decisions made in underground rooms while soldiers died on distant battlefields. He thinks about the balance between caution and audacity, between preserving lives and seizing opportunities. He thinks about Montgomery's careful brilliance and Patton's reckless genius, and how this war has needed both. But standing here on this swaying bridge over the Rhine, he knows which approach won the race. History will remember this moment. Churchill says, finally. Perhaps not the way either of you expect. He's right, of course. History will record Montgomery's Operation Plunder as a triumph of planning and coordination. But it will also record, often in footnotes, sometimes in whispers, that Patton got there first. That while one general was perfecting his plan, another was executing his. That in the closing months of World War II, an American cavalry officer achieved in a single night what others thought would require weeks of preparation. Not because he had more resources or better intelligence or superior forces, but because he understood something fundamental about war. Sometimes the greatest risk is waiting too long to take any risk at all. Churchill stays at the Rhine for 3 hours, touring positions, meeting with soldiers, allowing himself to be photographed against the backdrop of this historic crossing. But privately, in the moments between official duties, his mind is already racing forward, to Berlin, to the post-war world, to the difficult peace that will follow this hard-won victory. As his car pulls away from Oppenheim, heading back toward Britain and the endless work of governance, Churchill takes one last look at the Rhine through the rear window. The bridges, both Patton's expedient pontoons and Montgomery's more elaborate constructions, span the river like stitches closing a wound. The barrier has fallen. The road to Germany's heart lies open. And somewhere in the history books being written in real time, a footnote is being added that the first Allied crossing of the Rhine in World War II was achieved not by the massive, methodical Operation Plunder, but by a smaller, swifter operation that most people would never hear about. Patton's operation, completed in a day, while others were still planning for weeks. Churchill smiles slightly as the Rhine disappears behind them. He's witnessed many impossible things in this war. Britain's survival during the Blitz, the victory at El Alamein, the D-Day landings. But there's something particularly satisfying about this moment, about the reminder that audacity still matters, that speed can trump size, that one determined general with a clear objective can sometimes outmaneuver an entire army group with perfect planning. The war isn't over. Berlin still stands. Hard fighting remains ahead. But the Rhine, that ancient, formidable barrier, is behind them now. And George Patton, impulsive and brilliant and impossible to ignore, got there first.